The first quality is lovability, that they are lovable, that there is something, you see them and they open your heart, they draw you in. They're lovable. And the reason that they are lovable is because they are completely authentic, completely who they are. They might be, if they were in the Christian tradition, they'll have a Christian flavor to them. If they're in the Buddhist tradition, they'll have a Buddhist flavor. If they're scientists, they'll have a scientific flavor, whatever. So there'll be that kind of cultural context. But there's something about them that's just lovable, and they're lovable because they're authentic. That their spiritual practice helps to kind of purify, clarify, work through all the inauthentic parts of ourselves. Number one, the first quality of a meditation teacher, or let's say a mature teacher. Yeah, it could be anything. This could be a mature therapist as well. This could be a mature priest or monk or nun. It could be a mature leader of a company. The first quality is that they could be a mature sensei. For those of us here are kind of in the martial arts. The first quality, I know it's kind of I'm building up a lot of suspense here, but the first quality is lovability, that they are lovable, that there is something, you see them and they open your heart, they draw you in. They're lovable. And a few of you had already mentioned this. The reason that they are lovable is because they are completely authentic, completely who they are. They might be, if they were in the Christian tradition, they'll have a Christian flavor to them. If they're in the Buddhist tradition, they'll have a Buddhist flavor. If they're scientists, they'll have a scientific flavor, whatever. So there'll be that kind of cultural context. But there's something about them that's just lovable, and they're lovable because they're authentic. That their spiritual practice helps to kind of purify, clarify, work through all the inauthentic parts of ourselves. And when I say inauthentic parts of ourselves, it's all the, God bless us all, we all have ego strategies. That we just kind of, that's how we kind of, that's how the ego develops throughout the world. As we grow up in the world, we have these different strategies and how we relate and what our likes and dislikes and agendas and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. That's just how the false self is formed. And all of us, at least half of us, is a false self. And some people's false selves are very lovable. They're really great. Think of a comedian, and they're just always doing their shtick. And it happens to be a comedian that I just always love. So I'm always going to love them, but it's because of their shtick, their routine. And maybe speak of comedians, maybe performing artists are really a good example, because even though they're performing their art, at some point in that performance, they transcend the art. And that moment of transcendence is always super, super authentic. And it's the same thing with Dharma. It's the same thing in our meditation practice, same thing in therapy, same thing with teaching meditation. We have our methodologies and we have our schools and traditions that we come out of, and then maybe we're kind of, I am teaching this thing. But when the personality relaxes to the background, also all the agendas, all the preferences, all the fears, all the desires, all the shoulds and shoulds nots also recede to the background, and just a pure authenticity comes through. And that authenticity, I always say it, authenticity is sexy. If you see somebody just being authentic, it's just attractive. It just draws you in. Look at children. That's why sometimes children will just open their mouth and say the craziest, most authentic thing. You think, oh my God, sure, they're cute and wonderful, and especially if they're ours, they're even better. But it's like, it's just because they're authentic. That's just so beautiful. So, and that's what a meditation teacher, a spiritual friend, the Buddha says that their first quality is that they are lovable. And I know Nilu was a follower of Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed away. And most people that know Thich Nhat Hanh, probably that's the first thing they say. He was just so lovable. Just open your heart. You listen to him and you hear him talking. It's so gentle, and you're just brought into this really beautiful, open Dharma space that he shared. So simply, and so deep and authentic. And he was lovable. Quality number one is that they're lovable. And just think of your past teachers, even current teachers. Yeah, you can say that. Like my teacher, Pandita, this guy here. I don't know if you can see the picture. I talk about him from time to time. He passed away some years ago. He was I love him so much. He was a son of a bitch. He was and most people will tell you that. Of course he wasn't a son of a bitch. He was a beautiful man, but he was a really, really hardcore, old school, tough love teacher. So, I was talking about the medicine before. The Buddha would give, he's like a doctor. Well, he would give 2 types of medicine. He said there's 2 types of medicine. There are 4 types of medicine, sorry. There's sweet medicine that has sweet results. And then there's sweet medicine that has bitter results. And there's bitter medicine that has a sweet result. And there's bitter medicine that has a bitter result. Those are the 4 kinds of teaching. So what does that mean? Sweet medicine that has a sweet result is teaching with love and compassion. Like I was talking about Thich Nhat Hanh before. He just opened his mouth and start talking, and it's just so sweet to the ear and so beautiful. And the result was that sweetness and beauty awakened in you. That's sweet medicine with sweet results, teaching with compassion, holding and supporting the person you're working with as they're being taught or being held by the person who's helping you as they're helping you. And it has a beneficial result, helps us grow. Then there's sweet medicine that has a bitter result. That's the idiot compassion. That's if you think of a drug addict who kind of, in their suffering, they ask for money. So, and we know that there's a good chance, ask for money for food. This is really a simplistic answer. I'm not really, maybe it's not a good one, but just keep it as a simplistic example, excuse me. They ask for money for food, but you kind of know they're going to take the money and go buy drugs with it. Like a really bad addiction, let's say. So you give them money. Why? Because you feel for them. I feel sorry for them. So I'm going to give them money. And then they go and they do something that just multiplies their suffering. That's sweet medicine with a bitter result. So out of compassion, helping people, but in a way that doesn't help them ultimately, it actually, it just continues the addiction, it continues the bad habit or whatever it is. So that's the second type of teaching. The third type of teaching is bitter medicine with a bitter result. That's the tough love that actually, instead of supporting somebody, it breaks them down. You're just tough with them all the time, and it makes them collapse more, makes them weaker, makes them feel unvalidated, all that stuff. That's the bitter medicine with the bitter result. And then there's the bitter medicine with the sweet result, which is the tough love that wakes people up. And it's like, face the truth. But it's the right thing at the right time that it wakes them up. It's really tough love. It's hard to see that truth, but I can see it, and something happens and I learn from it. That's the bitter medicine with the sweet result. Now, Sayadaw Pandita was a bitter medicine teacher. He was a bitter medicine teacher. He always was like that. And yet at the same time, he was just lovable. Everybody loved him. Now, there are some people that didn't like his, because, when he was this kind of tough love teacher, very traditional, old school type of tough love teacher, some Westerners feel like they had that enough in whatever, Catholic school or whatever. They had that enough in the growing up. And they weren't really looking for that. So they didn't really appreciate him. But most people, or I shouldn't say most, many people did stay with him, and they were attracted to him for that straight truth. And even with that, he was just lovable, always lovable. So that's the first quality of a meditation teacher or a spiritual teacher or a spiritual companion, is that they are lovable. Yeah, is that clear? Does anybody have any question? We can move on to the second one. But if anybody wants to clarify or say anything, this is, I'll give you a moment at the end of each one of these.
Would you say that there's that these four medicines, well, the two good ones, the two that have good results are equally powerful depending on who's receiving the medicine?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's say it's the right medicine. Okay. Right medicine that leads to healing. Again, we'll stick with the metaphor. So now the Buddha was a master at the Buddha. I don't know the Buddha. I just hear about him and read about him. But it is said that he was a master at these things, and he knew exactly which medicine to give. And he could somehow see into the person he was with and give them the right teaching to turn their karma, basically. And sometimes it was bitter, sometimes it was sweet. The result was always positive, according to Buddhist mythology. It's 2,500 years old, but all the stories point to that. If we have let's say I come out of a tradition that's kind of a tough school. So I'm always teaching everybody tough because I was taught tough. That's kind of the cookie cutter approach, and it might not be the right thing for the right people, which is ironic because I actually came out of a really tough Aikido school, and I came out of a really tough meditation tradition, but I don't teach tough. Sometimes I might be like that, but generally, I'm kind of the opposite of that. So the answer is yes, Neela, that assuming that we have the maturity to actually understand which medicine is needed in the moment, it would have a good result. And if not, then there's some misunderstanding or some ignorance there, and we learn from hopefully we learn from the process. The story of the mustard seed? All the hands are coming up. I'll tell this quick story. It's from the Buddha's time. There was a woman, young woman. She was an adult, but she was young, and her baby died, which is, every parent here, that's as soon as you hear that, it's like, oh my God, that's it must be the worst. Anyway, so she was walking around with her child, and she was still in that kind of denial phase of the grieving process. And this was 2,500 years back in India. So she's just with the corpse of her baby, going from person to person, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, and nobody can help. And she heard that the Buddha was in the town next to her, and so of course she took her dead child to, or baby, actually, infant, to see the Buddha and please help me, please help me. And the Buddha says, okay, I can help you. Leave your baby with me. And you need to go into town, and you need to find a house that has never experienced death, and bring me one mustard seed, but it has to come from a house that never experienced death. So, okay, God, she's got a mission. So she's, to save her baby and bring her baby back. So she goes, knocks on the door of the house, and has anybody died? Well, yeah, our Uncle Charlie died, or whoever. Okay, she goes to the next house. Anybody? Yeah, well, my brother died. Has anybody died? So she's going from house to house to house to house, and every house has experienced death in one way or another. And after about several houses in the village, in the town, in the city, she started to get it, that it's everywhere. This is just a fact. And then something happened. She got it. Okay. And in that moment, that was the tough. That's kind of the tough. Maybe it was sweet. Maybe it was tough. I don't know. But she got it. And then she went back to the Buddha, and she was able to kind of process that grieving cycle. And God bless us all. Bury her child, and then she became a student. And the mythology is that all these stories, they all become the student and become enlightened. And so that would be one way that he taught. It was the right thing at the right time for this person who was in deep suffering, and they came out of it. So that's pretty wise, I guess, according to the story. But yeah. So I saw Joris's hand come up.
Yeah, but there was a lady first who raised her hand. I think Susanna.
Yeah, was it Susanna? Do you have your hand
yeah,
up, Susanna?
But by telling the story, you already answered my question.
Okay. Yours?
All right. So if I listened to you, well, if I understood well, whether a medicine turns out sweet or bitter does not just depend on the teacher, but also on the one who's on the receiving end.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
You can,
I would say it depends on the person, the receiving end. Yeah, like
okay, right.
Harriet was talking about the one of the qualities is really listening and knowing what to say or what to do or how to respond in the right way at the right time. But all of us have two things. We have the teaching tradition that we came out of. Like if you come out of a Zen Buddhist, it's slightly different than if you come out of a Vipassana, which is slightly different than if you come out of a mindfulness school, which is slightly different if you come out of some New Age tradition. So they'll all have their methodologies. And mindfulness is probably a good example because it's really coming out of the mental health sector. So there's already this kind of therapeutic framework, what do you say, context that people are working with. So everybody will be shaped by their context. But then there's the individual. Some of us are more tough love types of teachers, and some of us are more compassionate, supportive teachers. Actually, there's challenge and support. So some people would be more of a challenging, which is the tough love. Others would be more of a supportive, which is the compassion, and then others would be balance. A balance of those. And I'm not saying that any one of them are correct. Some of them, it totally depends on, what's happening in the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and also if you're a mindfulness teacher, meditation teacher, any kind of facilitator, sometimes we have to, Albert Camus. I love this quote from Albert Camus. Always go too far. It's the only place you'll find the truth. Sometimes as we're learning, there's a trial and error. We realize, let me try this new thing. We realize, I crossed the line that I shouldn't have crossed. Hopefully there wasn't a lot of damage, and you can I don't want to say clean up any mess. You can repair anything that maybe got collapsed there. You can recover from that. But then we learn. That's how we learn. That's part of the learning process.
All right.
Yeah. So first, Amy? Okay, so the first quality is lovability. And did you want to say something, Amy? I wasn't sure. Okay, I guess not. So that first quality is lovability, which brings us to the second quality. Super important because lovability means nothing unless we have the second quality. The second quality of a spiritual guide, mature.
Connected to DSKTOP7GO.
Okay, second quality of a spiritual guide, a mature spiritual guide, is that they are worthy of our love, which means they have a high standard they have high ethical and moral guidelines, that they're boundaried when things need to be boundaried. And that's super important because, especially if we give our internal process. I mean, therapy is really good about this, because therapy is regulated, and there's all these ethical guidelines and things you have to follow. Meditation world is a little bit different because it's not regulated like that. But it's important that if we're going to put our trust into somebody in some type of personal development sense, that the container has to be so pure in a way, so protected, so careful, and that it's there to support the individual who's in a way learning. So yeah, and we'll get more into this one about when we get to quality number 5, but they need to be worthy of such love. And if we look at the religious traditions, even though they are not perfect, and there's so many examples where that's gone wrong, but all of them have a really strong moral foundation. And again, this is not a morality workshop or anything like that, but it's very, very simple. Morality is simply about not harming other people, not harming ourselves, and not harming other people with our actions, not harming ourselves, not harming other people with our words. That's kind of simplifies it. And that would be if somebody's really adhering to those guidelines, then they would be worthy of our love. You know, if they're lovable and they've got those guidelines, then they're worthy of our love. Yeah, that want to be short and sweet. Anybody want to contribute to that or have a question?
I would have a question.
Okay.
If purity is purity of intention is the standard, then I think a lot of people who would like to share the Dharma would be okay under that definition. But if actually having the high standards for everything in life, it seems that that's a really hard thing to
Sure. First, purity of intention. Yeah, that's beautiful. So that's really what a person needs, that they're motivated to, let's say, share the Dharma out of compassion. Just, wow, this was so, I mean, look at most therapists in the world. They become therapists, not everybody, but many therapists become therapists because they went through a very transformational experience in their own therapy. So it's like, oh, this is so amazing. I want to commit to this. That motivation is beautiful and compassionate and pure. It might be other things, but at least that's there. Same thing with meditation. What was the second thing that you said? Because it was important. So this high standard. Good. So now here is I don't know if I can say fact, but a higher spiritual realization. Let's say a spiritually realized person will be a natural expression of a morally moral goodness. Yeah, just they don't say or do anything that harm other people. They only say and do things that help other people. That's the basic moral thing. Yeah, again, without getting into right and wrong, stuff like that. So now, but oh my God, that high standard that you're talking about, well, we're not all Buddhas here. So what are we to do? Well, we have ethical guidelines that we don't cross. You just don't cross, you know, you that's what I said before about being boundaried. That, you know, around money issues, you be very clear about that. Around sexuality issues, you be very clear around that. Around power issues, very clear, you know. And if there's the religious traditions have their ways of having boundaries, you know, usually monks and nuns. So that basically means no sex. No sex, you're not going to cause any problems with, you know, whatever. But of course, then that can be broken as well. But basically, the guidelines are there to do that. Until they're meant to be kind of like guardrails. And then as you become more and more as your spirituality becomes more and more mature, the guardrails can be relaxed because you're not going to go off track anymore. That's the idea. Yeah. So it's true what you pointed to, Nilu. It's a very high standard. And we're all human beings with shortcomings. So knowing that we're all human beings with shortcomings, it's good to set up some moral, ethical guidelines, excuse me. If we were like traditional Buddhists, it's very clear. Don't steal, don't kill, don't steal, don't speak falsely, don't do drugs, intoxicants that's going to make you lose your mindfulness. And what's the last one? Don't sell weapons. No, what is it? I forget what it is. There's 5. Those are the 5.
Speaking kindly to others.
Well, the 5. I took these precepts every day when I was in the monastery.
Sexuality.
Don't kill. Don't take life. Refrain from taking life. Refrain from false speech. Refrain from intoxicants that are going to make you lose your mindfulness. Refrain from harming others with your sexuality. Yeah. And number 5, refrain from. Renata, help me.
You've got 5.
Oh, do I have 5?
5, yes.
Okay, refrain from killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from speaking falsely, refrain from intoxicants that's going to make you lose your mindfulness, refrain from harming others with your sexuality. Yeah, that's it. So those are just guidelines. Now, because Buddhism is a religion, those can take on as they can be as equally as heavy as Catholic morality or Islam reality, whatever. That old tradition, those things become heavy. We are all kind of out of those traditions for several generations now, some of us, and we're kind of modernist or postmodernists. Those can be upgraded, and they should be upgraded. For example, traditionally, don't harm others with sexuality was, if you're not married, you don't sleep around. You don't have sex if you're not married. Okay, so we upgrade that. Some people before them, or when they're not married, they whatever, they play the field, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or some people even have open relationships, and I'm sure that would be a very tricky line to walk, but I'm sure there's an ethical way to do that. So these things can be upgraded, but basically the guidelines is what's important, and the fundamental thing is in that position. Through that position, it's to help others, not to harm them in any way. So, and if we do that, we'll be we'll be worthy of our students' love, basically. So number one, review. Don't a mature spiritual guide or spiritual friend is lovable. Number two, they're worthy of that love. Number three, the third quality of a spiritual guide or friend is that they are deeply experienced in both practice and theory. Deeply experienced in both practice and theory. So they put in their time. In Aikido, we always say you have to put in your time on the mat. You put in your, there's going to be some years where you're showing up to dojo 3 days a week or whatever it is. And, the years that you can do that, that's great because, later when you have kids, you won't be able to do that and whatever, but you put in your time. And, it's the same thing with meditation. You put in your time on the cushion, or you put in those minutes of being mindful, and they compound over time. But then we need some theoretical framework to hold all that together. And it could be a Buddhist theoretical framework. It could be a Christian theoretical framework, a Sufi theoretical framework. It could be a mindfulness theoretical framework. It could be a therapeutic or psychological theoretical framework. But those two things are really important to have those balance. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think it's the same with every spiritual tradition. But in Buddhism, they talk about this quite a bit. It's pariyatti and patipatti. Pariyatti is the study, and patipatti is the practice. And everything should be relatable as both practice and theory. For example, what we're talking about today is all theory. But before we finish today, we'll do some practice with this. So finding a balance. And it's also, there's these three aspects of learning. One is to have some theory. Number two is to have some practice. And number three is to reflect on how the theory and practice interrelates. And when you have those three aspects, the learning just really, it's like glue for the learning. It sticks with us. If you only have two and you're missing one, the learning is partial always. The experience could be full on, but then the degree to which it stays with you will be limited. So the third quality of a spiritual companion, spiritual friend, is that they have a depth of experience in both theory and in practice. And that doesn't mean they have to become a theologian or recite the sutras or anything. It doesn't mean that at all. It just basically means you have to kind of have a framework, context for what you're teaching and understand that. Okay, good. We'll move on to number 4. Fourth quality of a spiritual friend is that they can say what is difficult to hear. They can say what is difficult to hear. Now, this one has 2 meanings. One, they can say what is difficult to hear means that they can take a profound truth, or a very, very refined and subtle truth, and speak about it in a way, or articulate it in a way that the listener can grasp. Yeah. And that's, my God, that's a skill. That's something that's not always easy to do. I could pull out I remember the first time I ever taught meditation. I guess I was doing some in Aikido classes and like that, but then I came, there was a yoga school close to my apartment. I knew the teacher there, and she invited me to teach. She knew that I was meditating. She invited me to teach a class. So I went and I prepared, and I don't even remember what it was. It was a straight Buddhist text, and I was reading. I basically read each line, and about the third line, I knew that this is horrible. That I'm just like reading something, and nobody's really, if they're getting it, it's like completely dry and inauthentic, and yet I just kind of forged ahead because that's what I was going to teach. But it was very important learning lessons, because it was, it had nothing to do with the people that I was talking to. And then over time, you meet and you do more meetings and gatherings with people, and you speak, and then you kind of learn how to kind of reach people. And in fact, they say in Buddhism, they talk a lot about, or occasionally you hear about psychic powers that people develop. It's not taught in Buddhism, but they say that at a certain stage in the development, some people develop psychic powers, and others, they talk about all the different type of not telepathy, what's it called? Clairvoyance and clairaudience. Clairvoyance is the ability to see things that are unseeable. Clairaudience is the ability to hear things that are unhearable. And anyway, so that's the, it's neither here nor there. Maybe it's true, but then they say that there's actually a greater a greater psychic power. And it's a psychic power to teach, to be able to communicate a profound Dharma in a way that it reaches a person's, it kind of gets into their knowing part of their mind, that they get it. And that's something special, to really be able to kind of communicate that in a way. And it's super special to be to receive that transmission from the teachers. That, whoa, oh my God. When I started meditating, I went off to Burma the first time to do a retreat, and I thought, 20 days would be enough. And then I met my teacher, and then he was just saying things, just blowing my mind every time he would teach. And then I said, I'm going back. I went back for 3 months, and he's talking, daily talks, and just blowing my mind. And I'm going back. So it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. And I realized there was just more and more. So I was able to dedicate a considerable part of my life in those days, because I was really blown away with what I was learning from him, but then I was seeing it in my practice as well. So it was really beautiful. So this third quality, or we're on the fourth quality, right? This fourth quality, to be able to speak about things that are difficult to hear, has two meanings. And the first meaning is to be able to take a profound truth and articulate in a way where the hearer can actually get it. That's number one. Number two is the tough love. When somebody needs to hear the truth, as sometimes tough love is as tough for the person that has to say it as it is for the person who has to hear it. Oh God, I got to confront this person, and I got to call them on what they're doing. I got to tell them this. That's like, who wants to do that? But sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes I got to do that with my kids, and sometimes it's pretty easy with the kids, actually. But you can imagine. So that's also an important quality of a spiritual friend, that they can confront you, stop you, and say, look, with total love in the heart. Not to be just mean about it, but this thing. I suppose in the like when I'm giving meditation interviews, and I'll ask about the breath. This is a very simplistic example, but I'll ask about the breath, and people will tell me about everything except the breath. And it's funny, I laugh because it's the same thing I used to do. My teacher would ask me to explain the breath. Oh, and then my ear did this, and I was this thing, and its images came up, and all real things that happened. But I couldn't look at what he'd asked me to look at, and I would just tell him about everything else. And he would kind of hit me between the eyes with his tough love. one experience I had, and this is Upandita. I don't teach this way, and I'm not suggesting at all that anybody else teach this way, but it was the right teaching at the right time. I had been in Burma practicing for a few months already, and I was struggling like hell. Lots of hindrances. The mind is really tough. Had some good days and a lot of bad days. And I also had this kind of daddy issue with my teacher that, my father was absent for some time when I was a kid. And so that was playing out in my relationship with my meditation teacher. It played out in a lot of relationships with my teachers, in fact. But at the time, I basically wanted him to see me, be impressed by me and approve of me. And I was kind of playing that kind of game, wasn't so conscious for me. And I asked a question, pretty intelligent question that was way above my level. So he would gather the foreigners, and there was about 20 of us in a room. He gave a talk, and then he would take questions afterwards. And and I asked a question, something, I don't know, something that was way beyond my level. And he said, and he listened to me, and he said, well, what are you seeing in your meditation? So I described my breath, something like, well, I breathe in and it moves like that, and I breathe out and it moves like this. That was my report. And he looked at me and he said, your question is like a boy in kindergarten asking a university level question. And he said this to me in front of 20 people. And I just like, and it was true. It wasn't nice. I would never say that to somebody, but that's how he was. And it was very humbling to my ego. And I went back and licked my ego wounds. And next day I had another chance to ask a question, and it was just a straight question. I just kind of saw that, and I stopped playing the game. Of course, I played the game again and again from time to time, and he would somehow do the same thing. And then at a certain point, it was just straight. Everything was straightforward. Everything became straightforward because I realized I wasn't, as much as I was wanting a daddy figure, kind of wanting him to approve of me, what I really wanted was purification of the mind, the Dharma. And through that process, it helped me to understand what was really important. And I kind of grew up through that experience. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that that's the way everybody, that we should teach or even talk to people, But he said something that was really hard for me to hear, but it was good for me to hear that because I didn't do that anymore. It kind of balanced me. So that's another example. And again, a different teacher would handle it in a very different way, and maybe even have the same result, and maybe even have a better result. But there is this aspect that a spiritual friend will really kind of can confront us with things that we don't necessarily want to look at, but with love and compassion. That's number 4. Anybody want to add something to that before we go to number 5? So let's go through all 4 again. Review. Yeah, Neela.
I just am curious if he also had a sort of softer side, or was
totally.
he always?
No, totally. He just had he that was his kind of style. That was his personality. He was a tough love teacher, and I loved it. Part of me, coming from this kind of martial arts background and having these really warrior type of teachers, he was total samurai warrior, this guy, but with love, and he was, who Sharon Salzberg is, right? Nilu, yeah, she's a famous Vipassana teacher, but she probably became most famous for her book on metta, loving kindness. I think she was the first Westerner to write a book on loving kindness. So many people know her because of that. Upandita taught her loving kindness. So he also taught metta to people, and every one of the like Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, they all say the same thing. Yeah, he's a tough cookie. He was really tough, but there's nothing but the deepest love for him. Yeah. And it's also maybe context. He's a Burmese man, and Burma was under really, really, really strict military dictatorship for 50 years. and I mean, in a horror, the worst you can imagine. And as a Dharma teacher, the country was super poor, and it really went down the toilet because of the military dictatorship. And Aung San Suu Kyi, she was the basically the face of democracy, the democracy movement. Recently, there's some questions about her with the Rohingyas, but anyways, that's another story. But U Pandita was her teacher. He was her teacher, which I didn't know at all at the beginning, but later I kind of, so he was an amazing guy who had a lot of really, really amazing students who became amazing people, actually, because of that. So he covered number one, total lovability, completely.
May I say that your this last one reminded me of the last point that you gave us reminded me of the discourse of 5 ways of putting an end to anger, in which you look at something that's positive of the person you're trying to help or deal with. So it could be their speech, their action, or their behavior, or something in their spirit even. So you don't even see anything or hear anything positive, but there's something about their spirit that makes you gives you the compassion to try to help them. That's from the Buddha. And I'm always astounded because it's very deep to look at somebody's spirit, or try to resonate with them and feel that they, so even if you give somebody tough love, that you still see something good in them and you want to offer something that will help them and benefit them.
Yeah, great. I mean, everybody's redeemable, and the only thing that's unforgivable really is not asking for forgiveness when and even then it's just a temporary thing. As soon as somebody's available, you forgive, regardless of what was done. Doesn't mean you forget, but forgiveness is possible. Susanna?
Maybe if we are open, we're also able to feel whether the teaching person has internalized this, like we feel the inner quality, the energy. So maybe the person seems to be angry, shouting at us, but actually we know that this is a deep truth that the person is pronouncing. So we don't feel attacked because it's their truth and they're living what they're talking about. So
that's a tricky thing, because let's say that we, the students, that are kind of early in our studies, and the teachers so far ahead, it's a tricky thing because we can't really interpret what's going on with the teacher. We don't know, and sometimes a lot gets projected onto that. For example, I had an Aikido teacher who was just amazing, Saito Sensei, really, really amazing man. And he was also an alcoholic. And sometimes his anger and stuff would come out. And many of the students who were devoted students would interpret that alcoholic anger as his teaching. And from a very, very immature place, they would interpret that as his teaching. Oh, he's teaching it. That's his wisdom. Well, I mean, he was a wise man. But, he would finish off a bottle of whiskey in one day. And sometimes, pots and pans would go flying through the dojo, quite literally. He would fly off the handle and throw things, and some of the students, that would suit their trauma bond. It would be like a trauma bond or something like that. I don't know. So what you say is true, but the thing is, we can never really interpret what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point to balance what I actually wanted to say. I can give a direct example. I saw a video of this leader of the Shaolin headquarters here in Europe. He's become quite famous, having lots of videos on YouTube. And one video he was talking about that some of his students were writing not respectful comments about his new teacher, meditation teacher or whatever. And he said, you can't be disrespectful to a person that is the teacher of your teacher. It's simply not possible. And he was quite strict about that. But while he was speaking, I could also feel the respect that he had for his own father and his teachers. And I could understand that we related to our parents and that we are sort of inheriting their habits. So I did learn a lot, and I sort of gained instant enlightenment about this connection to our parents. And it felt good. It felt like opening up. So his teaching was strict, and his attitude was maybe like, you could interpret it as enraged, but I didn't think like he was enraged, but like only very clear.
Okay, Susanna, who knows? I mean, you know that situation. I don't know that situation.
Yeah,
but it's look, it's very complex, and there's no point. That's kind of just a theoretical thing right now. There's no really point for us to go into it. I think if we stick to the principles, then we can have more of a fruitful conversation. That sometimes we just don't know, and if a teacher is teaching one way to one person, it might be just because that's what that person needed in that moment. And if they're teaching another way to another person, it could be what they needed in that moment. And who knows?
Yeah, sorry, I think this went too far.
Great. So that's okay. Always go too far. Then we know that we find out where it's at. And but it's not that it's not a good thing to discuss and maybe be curious about and investigate. I just think it takes a little bit away from the principles right now that we want to kind of stay with, because there are so many examples of that we can learn from, but also, we have to be part of that context to learn. Fiona. Hi, Fiona. How are you? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Miles. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm just listening about the idea of a teacher. If you're like, I teach one-to-one, I did not meditations, I teach blind people to use a long cane or whatever, but I do teach groups as well. I teach like awareness training for groups and so on. And I have taught Aikido. But what I notice is that when you're teaching a group, there's a particular way you have to adjust, as opposed to when you're teaching one-to-one. You're teaching one-to-one, you can actually get feedback constantly from the person you're working with, and you can kind of tune into them very, very strongly and see where they're at, what they need. If you're teaching a group, that is not as easily done. And I think then it's up to the people in the group to decide, is this teacher and this teacher's methods suited to what my needs are at the moment? Because you can't be all things to all people all at the same time, or she, right. So if you have a group of people there and some people are finding this uncomfortable, it's up to them to accent themselves. They have to decide, this teacher's way of teaching to this group seems to suit everybody else, doesn't suit me, and look after yourself,
totally
and take yourself out of it. Find a teacher that does suit you, because each teacher, unless they're teaching you one-to-one, they can't possibly teach in a way that's going to be perfect for you. So if you have the luxury of a one-to-one session, brilliant. But if you haven't, then you need to get a teacher whose general way of teaching suits your way and your understanding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. How do you mute now? I like that. Thank you very much, Fiona. No, you're muted, so I can't hear you. Yeah, there is a difference between one-on-one and group dynamics, and that's definitely important. That's a whole nother skill. And something came up to me also about many of you know the story of Helen Keller. You mentioned helping blind people, and I know it from the old movie with Patty Duke in it. She was, and this poor girl was wild. She couldn't see, couldn't hear, right, and couldn't speak, and she had no context of reality, nothing, because her senses were diminished. And then her teacher was able to kind of spell water and put her hand in water, and then the whole world differentiated at that point. It's like her life changed completely. But her teacher was tough with her. That was tough love, because this poor girl was, at least in the movie, she was so wild. There was no way to get to her, and she had to be tough with her to get her. And once she got it, well, she became Helen Keller. And so that's an example of the right thing at the right time in the right way, which was tough love. That got her. Her world differentiated, and she got it. So anyways, that's point number 4, or the 4th one. So again, review. First quality is they are lovable. The second quality is they are worthy of our love because of ethical standards. The third quality is their deep experience in practice and theory. Fourth quality is that they can say what's difficult to say. They can speak about things that are difficult to communicate. And number 5, the fifth quality according to the Buddha, the fifth quality of a spiritual friend is that they only speak or share or teach for the benefit of the person they're speaking to, not for themselves. They only speak to benefit the person that they're teaching or guiding or with, not for their own benefit. So that's the compassion side, I think, that several of us already talked about. It doesn't mean that they won't ask for donations, if they're a church or something like that. That's kind of normal. That's how they survive. But it's there just to kind of, make people's lives better, basically. Yeah. And these are the 5 qualities according to the Buddha's guidelines for spiritual friend. They're lovable. They're worthy of love. They deep experience and practice in theory. They can speak profound truths in a way that the people can hear it. And they only teach or offer their guidance for the benefit of the person that they're with. Why don't we do a short, Fiona, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
You might be very well able to not consider your own needs while you're actually teaching somebody, but at the same time, it must be difficult. I don't do it myself, but it must be difficult to, if depending on that person, to pay your wages, put it that way.
Oh yeah, sure.
There must be a difficulty about the tough love thing, because if you tell somebody something they don't want to hear, and they decide, right, I'm not paying you anymore, I'm not coming to your flat, you're going to lose financially, and so it must affect you. It must be difficult to get that balance right. You kind of have to get something clear in your own mind about that you're not going to teach any differently because it might affect your income. I think that might be something people are doing it for the money.
Yeah, totally.
Get hold of that idea and be very firm about it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great point. I mean, so here we get into like really, really kind of important ethical questions, and by the way, you said that, if you're too tough with somebody, they'll stop being your client. But then again, other people will stop being your client if you're not tough enough with them. So it really depends. So in the end of the day, we can just be who we are. Yeah. And hopefully not be captured by, the needs of the audience too much in a way. So.
Something came up for me, and I've forgotten his name already. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It was about the neurosis of the teacher getting passed down into the problem, as it were.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And how we guard against that.
Yeah, that's great. That's why I said at the very beginning that we have this whole phenomena, especially in spiritual communities, where you say the neurosis of the teacher gets passed down to the students, which is true. Another way to look at it is the shadow of the teacher gets multiplied in the community. And it's a real thing. And I would say there's 2 ways to guard against that, probably more than 2 ways. Okay, this is just off the top of my head. It sounds like it's a whole nother workshop, but this off the top of my head, I would say first, there should be some ethical guidelines that everybody's accountable for. And like some communities don't have that. Like more New Age communities, they're kind of free there, and that, not that the freedom thing's cool, but maybe they'd be a little bit loose on the ethical guidelines. Other religious traditions will have strong ethical guidelines, but maybe we feel is too much. So that would be one, finding that ethical guideline that everybody's accountable to. Number 2 is a community, or is a council of elders type of thing.
Yes.
It doesn't even have to be elders. A place where information can flow horizontally freely. Might even be some young people in there that can, like the emperor's new clothes type of, they're able to speak the truth as well, so that power can't hide.
Yeah.
If there's an inner circle, and you could just hide power there and very subtly manipulate everybody else. So that seems to be one. And if there's, I think that's happening like in the therapeutic communities, that's very common. But I would say that meditation groups should also have that, to where things are transparent.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't have to be transparent, but certainly when it comes to human relations, things should be transparent. So that's just off the top of my head. Oh, the other thing I would say that again, all of us, because I know many people here are teachers or therapists or counselors or whatever, we need to keep practicing, and we should have our therapist or our teacher or our friend that we're checking in with regularly. This is why formal teaching is really great. It's like therapy; it's formal. You're not going out and having a beer with the therapist afterwards. You're not hanging out on the weekends with the therapist. Maybe when you graduate, that could be fine, but you're showing up in a formal way for a specific thing in a specific context, and then outside of that, you go about your life. There's something that's very clean about that, and it's also healthy, I think. And in that context, in that hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is, it's just they're there for you, or we're there for them, and that's it. Nothing else beyond it. So that's also kind of nice, I think. Formal contexts. Does anybody else want to share something that was interesting from your group? Yes, we'll do Nilu, and then we're gonna have to finish off here.
I appreciated listening to the 5 attributes, and while we were in the breakout group, I was thinking about where I would like to work on for myself, and it's still the same thing that since even college, which is my memory is not always a steel trap memory. So sometimes I may say something and really think that that's the case, and then later on I find out I made a mistake because my memory is not always so great. And in some areas it's very good, but so I appreciate that one has to keep sharpening the saw and have a teacher or mentor and so on. But since I'm way over 59, I always wonder if I'm going to ever get to the point of being very comfortable with having, the right steps to be able to go beyond a beginner level to teach mindfulness and meditation.
Well, I everything's relative, and I was talking with somebody about this just today. Actually, we did a little interview, and no matter where we're at, there are people who are behind us groping around in the dark, and we could say, oh, I was like that, and let me listen, there's a step here, there's a step there, and then boom boom, they get it. So that is relative. Now, will we ever be Thich Nhat Hanh? Oh, I don't know. I might aspire to that, but I'm getting a bit old, and I don't know if I can do that anymore. So whatever. But there's always, it's always relative. So there's always people that we can reach, and maybe we just even see them right in front of us. That we meet them in our work or in our daily life or something like that. Great. All right, everybody. So like I said, this was we're going to finish here in 4 minutes. Like I said, this was kind of a warm up and also an introduction to this to the next cohort that I'm opening up for my Mindfulness Meditation Teachers Training. It's a 200-hour year-long training, and it's starting at the end of March, in about 4 weeks from now. And if anybody is interested in it, I would really, you're very welcome to explore to see if it's something you might be wanting to join. It's a pretty intense program. I'm going to put the link in here if anybody wants to see it. It's a pretty intense program, but it's also a wonderful deep learning, and it's again a practice and theory. It's a deep learning, and over the whole year you go through pretty much a beautiful transformational process that we meet. It's kind of broken up into 2 certification levels. The first level, we meet intensely for 1 month or for 3 months. And then we meet a little bit more relaxed after that for the next 8 months. And there's some bonus modules in it, and about like the business side of having a meditation group. And there's also, I'm adding a couple of new bonuses. Matthias and Renata, they did the training last year. I'm adding a day workshop on Buddhist psychology and a day workshop on meditation and shadow work. So those are things. In fact, Matthias or Renata, you want to say something short about it, about how it was for you, the training?
I can do. I think you said there in the beginning, it's pretty intense, but also it really kickstarts your own practice the first 3 months, weekly meetups and some readings and theory in between, and also daily sittings, and really to get that into your system. So for me, that was that was an excellent start of sort of getting into more of the teacher's mode as well, and going from being a practitioner and parts of a lot of your courses and my own work as well, and then going more into the teacher side. So it really sets a great foundation, I think, for any type of practice. Or I do this alongside of my normal work in the corporate world. So I've sort of brought the mindfulness to my colleagues and friends there as well, with great benefits. So I can just deeply recommend it. Renata?
Thanks.
Yeah, and I can only say this is true. Well, I'm not really teaching, but I have become more like grown up about the way I relate about this topic with other people now in my everyday life, which helps a lot. And it's also a great, there's also we had these learning pods, and I've been in the training, but this learning pod, which is that one student has regular meetings with one other student, we are still doing it, and this exchange is pretty important too. And a lot of the value of the course is also in this inter-student exchange.
Like, I'm just looking at the time. I don't want to cut you, and so thanks, Renata. If you can say just a few quick words about it, Susan, and then we'll finish off.
I'm just going to enhance exclamation points what Matthias and Renata had said. I deeply recommend it as well. It was a great experience for me.
I want to thank everybody for joining us on this this kind of exploration of the essential qualities of a meditation teacher. And I hope that that we can all kind of, either as a student or as a teacher, or looking at somebody that's helping us, or when we are helping others, that we can manifest love, we can be worthy of that love, that we can go deep in our understanding of an experience of practice and theory, that we somehow learn how to communicate what we know on a deeper level. We can actually put that in words and help others with it. And that when we do so, it's for the benefit of others.